Do championship teams need an elite weapon to win the Lombardi? There's been plenty of discourse following Justin Jefferson's high-end record-breaking contract with the Vikings. We will answer that question and much, much more right now on Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi again, everyone, and welcome in to a Wednesday edition of Locked On NFL. I'm James Rapien. No Chris Carter this week. That is okay, though, because we are locked and loaded with a ton for you. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And shout out to all of our everydayers out there. And make sure that you hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Follow wherever you get your podcast because, well, the NFL season doesn't take a break. And I think that's something we've learned over the past few weeks, certainly. Even though the draft is over, even though the bulk of free agency is over, we're still seeing things. And with mandatory minicamp starting for a lot of teams this week, we're going to have you covered. And one of the storylines just throughout minicamp is naturally contracts. And Justin Jefferson got his contract a few weeks back. And I think since then, in full disclosure, I covered the Bengals for the Locked On Bengals podcast, me and my co-host Jake Lisco. And so guess what we've talked about plenty? A potential Jamar Chase extension. More on Jamar, more on CeeDee Lamb, more on these guys that could get paid coming up in just a few minutes here on Locked On NFL. But that has led, in the Justin Jefferson conversation, has led just not in Cincinnati, but really everywhere, I think. Oh, well, you don't need an elite weapon, especially if you have an elite quarterback. You don't need to do that. Look at Patrick Mahomes. That one is thrown out so much. It's really unbelievable. It is, because you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, and it's real easy to say, oh, they've won back-to-back Super Bowls without Tyreek Hill, and you don't need an elite weapon. And, well, they actually have the most famous man in football on their roster. I said that right, and I'll say it again. And this is coming from someone that covers Joe Burrow. This is coming from someone that is very aware of how relevant Patrick Mahomes is, and yet he takes a backseat to his tight end. Of course you need an elite weapon, and the Chiefs have an elite weapon. What they couldn't afford is multiple elite weapons with Chris Jones, with Patrick Mahomes, and they decided to restructure their team around elite quarterback, elite weapon, elite playmaker on defense. That's what they did. But this idea that, oh, the Chiefs have won back-to-back Super Bowls and they don't have an elite weapon, it's the silliest thing ever. Travis Kelce is literally the most famous man in football right now. Period. That's it. The most famous man in football. Arguably the best tight end ever. And you could say, oh, well, he took a step back, James. He took a step back. All right, well, let's look at the numbers. I'll just pull them up right now. Okay, he had 93 catches last year. All right, played through some injuries. Yeah, was a tad shy of 1,000 yards, and he could have easily gotten to 1,000 yards had they tried to push the envelope late in the season. But guess what? They're playing for Super Bowls. Prior to that, he had 1,100, then 1,000, then 1,300, then 1,200, then 1,400, then 1,100, then 1,300. The point is Travis Kelce has had at least 83 receptions and 984 yards, we'll say, but we can round up to 1,000 since 2016. Since pre-Patrick Mahomes, since before anyone knew that Patrick Mahomes would become the greatest quarterback on earth. Why? Well, because he's an elite weapon. Elite weapons matter. You want to win a ring? That's what you need. You need at least one elite weapon. Now, that doesn't mean you need 7. That's what the Chiefs have shown, that you don't need 7 elite weapons, that it might be good to build around one elite weapon, one elite quarterback. You pay those 2, and then you worry about the rest. Do the Chiefs have an advantage because receivers are making more than tight ends? Absolutely. It's a very unique situation there because it's hard to find a tight end like Travis Kelce. It's going to be that consistent year in and year out. Even some of these young tight ends that are really, really promising. We don't know if Sam Laporta is going to touch those type of numbers with that Travis Kelce put up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 straight seasons of 1,000+ yards, and it really should be 8. The Chiefs are playing for a ring. Otherwise, it would have been where they would have pushed it in that Week 18 matchup. The point is, the Chiefs have had an elite weapon. And I think it's really interesting the discourse about that. They've won back-to-back Super Bowls, absolutely. In defense, big factor. Patrick Mahomes, huge factor. Elite tight end, also huge factor. And that's why I'm here to tell you, if you want to win a Super Bowl, you're going to need at least one elite weapon. It's just it. Now, maybe you spread it out and you're like, oh, well, there's not an all-pro on some of these teams, but you look over the past 10 years of who's won the Super Bowl, right? The past 10 Super Bowls. You have New England over Seattle going back to the 2014 season. Is Julian Edelman and Rob Gronkowski, are those guys not elite? Julian Edelman was an elite playoff performer. Heck, Danny Amendola was huge in that game. Rob Gronkowski, huge for the Patriots for many, 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 many years. And yeah, you could say, oh, well, he dealt with injuries and there was times when New England had to win without him. I don't want to hear it. He was still a big part of that team, even if it wasn't for that season. The following year, the Denver Broncos, obviously Peyton Manning was washed. Do we remember that they had Demaryius Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders? Okay. Like they had really, really good weapons. And as it goes on and as it moves forward, you realize, okay, well, yeah, they have weapons. The 28-3 comeback by the Patriots. Okay. Look, Tom Brady makes a comeback. Awesome. Julian Edelman, big factor there. I could look at that roster. There were other factors. The next year, the Philadelphia Eagles, they had a bunch of weapons. Now, did they have one elite weapon? No, but Zach Ertz, Alshon Jeffrey, they scored 41 points. You're telling me that offense wasn't awesome? Of course it was. So you can't say, oh, well, the Eagles prove that you don't need an elite weapon. Okay, fine. Well, you need really, really good weapons to score 40 plus in the Super Bowl. That's really, really hard to do. You could argue the Patriots in 2019, at the end of the 2018 season, they beat the Rams 13-3. Gronkowski wasn't the Gronk we remember, but he made the game-changing play. The game on the line, he makes the play that kind of seals the deal for the Patriots. And so even though that was ugly and it was a defensive slugfest, you still had Edelman, you still had Gronkowski, you still needed to rely on those weapons. But that's the best argument. Recently, it's real easy. The Chiefs, they won their first Super Bowl at the end of the 2019 season. Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. The following year, Tampa Bay wins it. Tom Brady takes down Patrick Mahomes, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Rob Gronkowski. The list goes on and on and on there. The following year, the Rams with Cooper Kupp, no doubter, elite weapon. Past 2 years, Travis Kelce. The point is you need an elite weapon. Or just so many high-end weapons, which is even probably harder to do, that you don't need that one elite guy. But it's really hard to have 5 B+, A- weapons when you already have one of these CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chases. And that's what's so interesting. If you have one of those guys, you pay him. You don't trade them. You don't get cute. You don't act. They don't grow on trees. You don't think Tom Brady loved to go from New England, where he didn't have one of these big, physical, fast wide receivers that could get downfield at the end of his tenure, to going to Mike Evans? Of course he loved throwing to Mike Evans. It's Mike Evans. And even then they went after adding Gronk, after having Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, did they go get Antonio Brown? Oh, they did. It's a weapons league, ladies and gentlemen. It's a weapons league. And the receiver market has shifted, certainly over the past 10 years as I look at those, but over the past 5 or 6 years, it's shifted a lot. Over the past 2 to 3 years, it shifted. It's going to continue to shift. That does not mean wide receivers don't matter. It does not mean that you can get by with going cheap and not paying your weapons. And that's why when people say that, well, I balk at it. You want to win a Super Bowl, you got to get your elite quarterback. One, you obviously need an elite quarterback, but you got to get them weapons. And we'll continue that conversation with a look at who could get paid coming up next, and if Dallas should pay CeeDee Lamb, if the Bengals should pay Jamar Chase following that huge Justin Jefferson extension. We will do that coming up next. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is the app you need to download now to get to all of your favorite events. The NBA Finals are in full swing, and whether it's game 3 of the finals on Wednesday night in Dallas, and maybe you're in Dallas ready to see if Luka and Kyrie can turn the series after falling behind 2-0, or it's any favorite summer event, whether it's concerts, whether it's Major League Baseball, whether it is, heck, NBA Summer League, if you're looking for tickets for that, or you're looking ahead to the NFL season, Gametime is going to have the tickets you're looking for. They have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and they have a lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying all tickets to all live events, including the NBA Finals. They have flash deals, zone deals, all-in pricing, seat views that give you a panoramic view from your seat so you know exactly what you're getting. So don't delay. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Let's keep things rolling here on a Wednesday edition of Locked On NFL. And the discussion around weapons, we'll continue that with two guys that should get paid in the near future. And the Dallas Cowboys should absolutely pay CeeDee Lamb. He would be number one on my priority list, ahead of Dak Prescott going into a contract year, ahead of some of these guys that, honestly, if you're building a team, you're hoping that your first round pick becomes CeeDee Lamb. You're hoping that your first round pick becomes Jamar Chase. Like, let's just use this rookie class, for example. Marvin Harrison Jr. Wouldn't you love it if you're a Cardinals fan right now to say, man, the Cardinals drafted Marvin Harrison Jr. and 4 years into his career, he has 395 receptions, 5,145 yards, 13 yards per catch. His average touchdowns wise per year, 8 touchdowns per year, 32 total. Wouldn't you love that? Wouldn't you love to say, all right, over the past 3 years, he's had at least 1,100 yards. Last year, he had 1,700 yards. First 4 years, that's exactly what you want. If you, let's go with the Bears and Rome Odunze now. And obviously Malik Neighbors is in this case. And really any wide receiver that is drafted early, you're hoping becomes this. But would have 268 receptions, 3,700 yards, 29 touchdowns in his first 3 years. Oh, well, that's Jamar Chase. And he's coming off of a career best 100 reception season. Absolutely. You take that all day long. And so it's really weird, the idea. And I get the market shifts. But just because the market shifts doesn't mean that you don't go in on these elite weapons. And whether you're contending or whether you realize how hard it is to find, if you need reliable weaponry, you can't just stumble into a Jamar Chase. You don't just stumble into a CeeDee Lamb. And heck, the Cowboys got lucky because the NFL let CeeDee Lamb fall to them at pick 17. They got lucky there. That never should have happened. That would never happen in this day and age. That's how quick the market has shifted. CeeDee Lamb, there's zero chance he falls to pick 17 in this year's draft if he's in it, even though it is a great wide receiver draft. And so, of course you pay these guys. The cap is going to continue to go up. Dallas would have benefited by paying CeeDee Lamb last year. And that's why when I look at who should get paid first, who will get paid first, if you're the Bengals and he was drafted in 2021, pay Jamar now. Find a way to pay him now. And whether it's a 4-year deal like Justin Jefferson received, and the Vikings waited till after year 4 to pay Jefferson. And so if you're Jamar, you might want that too, but try to get him on a 4-year deal. Try to spread that money out. Try to keep him long-term with Joe Burrow. And then if you're the Cowboys, pay CeeDee. What are you going to do? Rebuild? All right, well, that's fine. Let's just say it out loud. Let's say you try to rebuild and you bring in a young quarterback. Wouldn't you want CeeDee Lamb catching passes from that young quarterback? It's what the Vikings are doing. That's why I like what the Vikings are doing. If JJ McCarthy is going to be a good NFL quarterback, don't you want weapons around him? Of course you do. And they have it. Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson coming off of a serious injury, but they have TJ Hawkinson. They have weapons. You want to surround your young quarterback with weapons. And so CeeDee Lamb, it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer to pay him. And so who gets paid first between Lamb and Chase? Well, Chase is under team control for the next 2 years. The Bengals exercised his 5th-year option. And so if I'm the Cowboys, I think there's a little more urgency there, honestly. If I'm the Cowboys, I think, all right, we only have the 5th-year option next year. Obviously, you're using that. But he's not there he wasn't there for minicamp last week. Like, just get it done. And now you have a blueprint where Justin Jefferson was drafted 5 picks later. then CeeDee Lamb has outperformed Lamb, but Lamb has been awesome. So give him the Jefferson contract. That's what I would do. And I wouldn't think twice about it, because paying CeeDee Lamb, paying a 25-year-old that's coming off of a 1,700-yard season, 135 receptions, is your clear number one weapon. And in most instances, is your number one and number two weapon, and is your first option, your second option. It's going to be worth it, whether you keep Dak Prescott, whether you move on from Mike McCarthy, whether you have a young quarterback, whether you bring in a veteran quarterback, whatever the future holds, it's worth it to keep CeeDee Lamb. And the price only goes up. And so if I'm the Bengals this week, what would I be doing? I'd be trying to get a Jamar Chase extension done now. Now, not later. I wouldn't wait, because the price is going to go up, much like it did for CeeDee Lamb in year 4 if he goes off for 1,749 yards, a career high, and has 12 touchdowns and has 135 receptions with a long reception of 92 yards. If he is that game changer, which we know Jamar is, but puts up those type of numbers, the price goes up. That number that CeeDee Lamb is going to get, whatever the contract is, the reason it'll be close to Justin Jefferson around it is because of last year. He made a leap. He has 3,000 yards over the past 2 seasons. You do that, you have that kind of production, 3,000 yards and 21 touchdowns in 2 years. Well, that's production that's going to get you paid. So who should be first? Who will be first? I think the Cowboys need to be more desperate. So probably the Cowboys, but both teams should be pushing the envelope here. Both teams should be pushing to pay these guys and get it done and get these guys locked up. And we'll see if it happens. But to me, man, it is quarterback, pass rush, weapons. And you want to have all 3 of those. Well, I look at the Cowboys. Yeah, they got to pay Micah. Yeah, they got to pay CeeDee, which means you're probably going young at quarterback at some point. That's fine. You know what's good about it? Really, really good about it? It's a good problem to have. Going back to the draft situation, right? When you take these guys, you would love to have this problem of, man, how are we going to figure out how to pay them? Well, you find a way. You structure it in a way that you can, and the sooner you do it, the more beneficial it's going to be, because the cap continues to climb. And so if you're the Bengals, if you're the Cowboys, you want to get something done with both of these guys sooner rather than later. Up next, a longtime AFC North head coach. Well, he is locked up long-term. What it means and why I think it's significant. We'll get to that coming up next. Welcome back to Locked On NFL. I'm James Rapien. Chris Carter out this week. He will be back next week. What's really, really interesting about the Mike Tomlin extension, and this came down earlier this week. 3-year extension for Mike Tomlin, under contract now. He had 1 year left on his deal. Now 25, 26, 27, all under contract. What that does is that ensures that the post-Ben Roethlisberger era, that Tomlin gets some job or has some job security as the Steelers continue to look for a quarterback. That's what it does. And what's interesting about it to me is exactly that. The fact that they don't know if Russell Wilson's going to work. And odds are he'll be fine, not great, where you give him a long-term extension after this year, and not bad. He's good value at what they're paying him. But there's a good chance that that's kind of like a 1-year deal. And that's it. It doesn't turn into more. And so that's a stopgap at quarterback. Justin Fields, what are the odds that he becomes the Steelers' future quarterback? Pretty up in the air. So what the Steelers are saying is, yeah, Mike, we know you're the guy for us. We know you're the one that's going to bring us into this next era of Steelers football, regardless of who's playing quarterback. That's all this extension means. And I think the discourse around Mike Tomlin is really interesting. He hasn't won a playoff game, or he hasn't done. The AFC is impossible to win in consistently if you don't have an elite quarterback. If you don't have an elite quarterback, I just did a bunch of time on weapons. If you don't have an elite quarterback, it is really, really hard to win. And he's still finding ways to win in the best division, despite having awful quarterback play. I think he deserves credit for that. I also think the front office better find a way to get a quarterback. And so it's either this year with one of these guys, and whether it's Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, Maybe one emerges, maybe Fields. Ideally, it would be Fields, right? Because of age, all of those things, draft position, what he probably has left physically, longevity, all of those things that could be there. But if that doesn't happen, I just mentioned young quarterbacks. The Steelers got to push the envelope here. You can't continue year in and year out to piece it together quarterback wise. And look, I get it. They drafted Kenny Pickett in the first round. That was an awful quarterback class. And so, like, Kenny Pickett's probably not even a first rounder this year. Like in this year's class, he's probably not. Like Michael Penix Jr., better quarterback than Kenny Pickett, better prospect than Kenny Pickett. And so, not shocking that didn't necessarily work out, but you better find a solution. And maybe that solution, and I'll float it out there, is a Dak Prescott, is someone that can raise the floor of everything a year from now. And so that's what's so interesting about the quarterback market is you could be frustrated with a guy. The Vikings and Kirk Cousins, they clearly wanted to get younger at quarterback, right? And probably cheaper. Okay. The Falcons are like, come on, Kirk, let's go. Right away, off the Achilles. And I know they drafted Michael Penix Jr., fine. But they're like, we need to raise the floor of our quarterback room. We can't have quarterback cost us games. And so Dak Prescott is going to have a huge market. It's why Baker Mayfield worked in Tampa. They go there, they take a low risk, give him a low risk 1-year deal, and they're like, oh, he can raise the floor of our quarterback room in the post-Tom Brady era. The Steelers really have struggled to find that in the post-Roethlisberger era. And what the extension does for Mike Tomlin is it ensures, it gives him some assurance that he's going to be the guy to lead the Steelers into that next era, whatever it is, where they're hoping they find the right quarterback, where they're hoping they find a way to compete. And not just compete, because obviously they've been competitive, but compete for championships again. They haven't been a Super Bowl contender in quite some time. And so will he be able to do that? Will he be able to restore them to that level? Well, to me, it comes down to the front office now, because the front office is saying, ownership is saying, Mike Tomlin, you're the guy. We know it. Now, the next step is finding the right quarterback. And if the Steelers can do that, and maybe it is Justin Fields, maybe it is Russell Wilson, although I think that's less likely. Maybe they are going to get competent quarterback play this year or above average quarterback play. If they do that, if they get above average quarterback play, Steelers are going to be really good because they have the defense. They're well coached. They have some solid weapons. And when you mix all that together, it works. It works. We've seen it work. And so we will see. I don't think that they're a Super Bowl contender this year, but could they be good? Yeah, but it comes down to the quarterback. And I think there's so many times we see coaches get fired because the quarterback is wrong or the front office gets the quarterback wrong. And what the Steelers did on Monday when they signed and announced Mike Tomlin's 3-year extension is pretty simple. Mike, you're the guy, regardless of what's happened quarterback-wise. We believe in you. Now let's figure out the rest. And I think it makes sense. I also think they better get it right at quarterback soon. Otherwise, the record of or the streak of him always having a winning record, at some point it's going to end because you can't do it in today's NFL without an elite quarterback, especially in the AFC. You rattle off the teams in the AFC. It's insane, the quarterbacks. It really is. And to win consistently with, all right, I'm gonna run them all down here. Maybe it's Tua. Maybe that's the guy that maybe Miami lets him walk. I don't know. I think that's interesting. Anyways, Josh Allen, Tua Tagovailoa, Aaron Rodgers, and then you have Jacoby Brissett, probably, but maybe Drake May for New England. Lamar Jackson. You have Joe Burrow. You have C.J. Stroud, Trevor Lawrence, Anthony Richardson, who I think is going to be good. Patrick Mahomes. I mean, Justin Herbert, obviously. I mean, there's so many good quarterbacks. And so if you don't have one of those guys, you're already starting with one arm behind your back. And that's why it's going to be tough for the Denver Broncos with Bo Nix. That's why it's going to be tough for the New England Patriots. That's why it's hard on Cleveland. They've had a really, really good roster over the past few years, but they haven't gotten high-end quarterback play. When you don't have that, for whatever reason, with Deshaun Watson, it's tough. And so we will see there. We will see if Tennessee can figure it out with Will Levis. I think that's an uphill battle. And then obviously the Raiders are really battling uphill. Regardless, though, I think it was the right move by the Steelers, and we'll see if it pays off. They have to find a way to get that quarterback position right. They took a couple swings that I like, low risk on Fields, low risk on Wilson. We'll see if one of those pans out. Make sure that you subscribe on YouTube, follow wherever you get your podcast. This was a solo episode of Locked On NFL, but we will be back next week. Chris Carter and I will be, and make sure you check out our show all week long as we have 5 episodes every single week right here on Locked On NFL. Until next time, I'm James Rapien. Thank you so much for watching and listening to Locked On NFL.